Have you ever noticed the exact moment you stopped responding to a narcissist? And something inside you felt different? Not angry, not emotional, just done. No big decision, no dramatic exit, just a quiet shift, where you looked at the message or heard the tone or saw the pattern play out again. And for the first time, you didn't feel the need to engage. That moment matters, because up until then, you responded, you explained, you clarified, you defended yourself. You tried to make things make sense, and every response, even the calm ones, kept the dynamic alive. But something changes here. Not in them, in you. The urgency disappears. The need to correct them fades. The pull to respond weakens. And what replaces it isn't anger. It's clarity. You've seen the pattern enough times. The same conversation, the same deflection, the same outcome. So instead of engaging, you stop participating. This is the moment you go silent. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but because continuing no longer makes sense. And that's what makes it different. Because this isn't withdrawal driven by emotion. It's detachment driven by understanding. And from the outside, it doesn't look like much. No argument, no announcement, no explanation. Just silence. But internally, everything is shifted, because the dynamic that once required your reaction no longer has access to it. And that's the beginning of something the narcissist isn't prepared for. Because while silence feels like peace to you, to them, it feels like something else entirely. In the next chapter, we'll look at why this silence feels so different, and why it carries more power than anything you said before. Have you noticed how your silence feels completely different this time? Even to the narcissist? Not passive, not uncertain, not waiting for a response. Something about it is final, because this isn't the silence you used before. This isn't distance created out of frustration or space taken to cool off. This is silence with awareness, and that changes everything. Before, your silence still had tension in it. You were still thinking about the conversation, still replaying it, still wondering if you should respond or how you should respond. But now, there's no urgency behind it. No pressure, no internal pull to go back and fix anything. And the narcissist can feel that, even if nothing is said, because silence usually comes with signals, subtle indicators that the connection is still active, that the conversation isn't finished, that you're still emotionally involved. But this silence doesn't carry those signals. It doesn't reach. It doesn't react. It doesn't invite. It just holds. And that's what makes it different. Because the narcissist isn't responding to your words anymore. They're responding to your absence of response. And absence creates uncertainty. They can't read your tone. They can't anticipate your reaction. They can't steer the conversation. Because there is no conversation. And for someone who depends on emotional movement, that stillness becomes uncomfortable. They may not react immediately, but something shifts internally. Because this silence doesn't feel temporary. It feels disconnected, like the usual access they had to you is no longer there. And that's what gives this moment its weight. Not what you said, but what you didn't. Because this kind of silence doesn't argue, it doesn't defend, it doesn't explain. It simply removes participation. And once that happens, the dynamic begins to change. Because now the narcissist has to decide what to do without the reaction they're used to. In the next chapter, we'll look at how quickly they notice this shift and why your silence doesn't go unnoticed for long. Have you ever noticed how quickly a narcissist senses it when you stop responding? Not days later, not after multiple attempts, almost immediately, because even though nothing is said, something is missing. The usual response, the reaction, the engagement, and they feel that absence right away. At first, it might be subtle, a pause on their end, a slight shift in tone, a message that feels probing. Everything good? Did you see my message? Are you okay? It doesn't sound aggressive. It sounds casual. But it's not about concern. It's about confirmation. They're checking if the connection is still active, if the dynamic is still intact. Because up until now, it always was. You always responded. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not immediately, but consistently enough for them to rely on it. And now, that consistency is gone, and that creates something they don't like: uncertainty. They can't tell if you're busy, if you're upset, or if something has fundamentally changed. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because your silence isn't just quiet, it's unfamiliar. And unfamiliar patterns get attention, so they test it. Another message, a slightly different tone, maybe something lighter, maybe something more direct. Not to reconnect emotionally, but to see if the old response is still there. And if you don't respond, the signal becomes clear. This isn't a delay. This is a shift. And once they realize that, their behavior starts to change. Because now, it's no longer about the conversation. It's about regaining access. And access is something they're not used to losing. In the next chapter, we'll look at the first real attempt to break your silence and how they begin testing the boundary you've just created. The first attempt to break it. Have you ever noticed how a narcissist responds the first time your silence doesn't break when they expect it to? They don't confront it directly. Not at first. They test it carefully. This is the first attempt to break your silence. And it rarely looks aggressive. It looks small. A casual message, a light tone, something that feels almost normal. Hey, just checking in. Hope everything's good. On the surface, it doesn't seem like much, but it's not random. It's a probe. They're not trying to resolve anything. They're trying to see if the door is still open. Because if you respond, even briefly, the dynamic resets, and everything goes back to how it was. That's all they need. One response, one signal that you're still reachable. And if you've responded in the past, they expect you to again. Because silence to them has always been temporary. But this time, it's not. And when that message doesn't get a response, they adjust. Maybe the next one is slightly more direct. Did I do something? Are you ignoring me? Still testing, still looking for any reaction. They're trying to pull you back into interaction, any interaction. And this is where most people break, not because they want to go back, but because the silence starts to feel uncomfortable. You might feel the urge to explain, to respond just enough to keep things calm. But that's exactly what this moment is designed to trigger, because once you respond, even to explain your silence, you're no longer silent, and the structure reactivates. But if you don't respond, something else happens. The test fails, and when the first attempt doesn't work, they don't stop. They escalate, because now it's not just curiosity, it's disruption. In the next chapter, we'll look at what happens when the testing turns into confusion, and they begin trying to understand what changed. The confusion phase. Have you ever noticed how a narcissist starts acting differently when your silence doesn't break? Not aggressive yet, just uncertain. Because now the test didn't work. You didn't respond. You didn't explain. You didn't re-engage. And that creates something unfamiliar. Confusion. At this stage, they're not sure what changed. The pattern has always been predictable. They say something, you respond. They push, you react. But now, there's nothing coming back. And that absence forces them to think. Was it something they said? Did they go too far? Are you upset? Or are you just gone? So they try to figure it out. Another message, a different tone, maybe softer, maybe slightly more direct, still controlled, still measured, because they're not trying to escalate yet. They're trying to understand. And this is where the shift becomes real, because your silence is no longer seen as temporary. It starts to feel intentional. And intentional silence is hard to read. They can't interpret it, they can't predict it, and they can't control it. And that's what unsettles them. Because without a reaction, there's no direction, no way to steer the interaction, no way to reset the dynamic. So the uncertainty grows. And when uncertainty lingers long enough, it doesn't stay calm. It turns into something else. In the next chapter, we'll look at what happens when confusion turns into pressure, and they begin escalating to force a response. Have you ever noticed how a narcissist changes their tone when your silence doesn't break for long enough? It stops being casual, it stops being controlled, and it starts becoming forceful, because confusion doesn't last forever. Eventually, it turns into pressure. This is where the escalation begins. The messages change, they become more direct, more pointed, more loaded. Why are you ignoring me? What's your problem? So you're just not going to respond? The tone sharpens. The patience disappears. Because now, they're not trying to understand your silence. They're trying to break it. And the way they do that is by increasing the emotional weight. Maybe it comes as frustration, a sharper edge, a tone that pushes instead of probes. Or maybe it comes as guilt. You're really going to do this? After everything? Or even subtle pressure? I guess I know where I stand now. Notice what's happening. They're introducing emotion again. Not to resolve anything, but to force movement. Because silence removes their control, and escalation is an attempt to get it back. They're trying to create discomfort, to make the silence feel heavy enough that you respond just to relieve it. And this is where most people give in, not because they want to, but because the pressure works, the tension builds, the urge to respond grows, to explain, to defend, to just say something. But that's exactly what this moment is designed to trigger. Because once you respond, even briefly, the silence is broken and the dynamic restarts. But if you hold it, if you don't react, something else happens. The escalation doesn't land. And when escalation fails, the reaction changes again. Because now, it's no longer about pressure. It's about emotion. In the next chapter, we'll look at what happens when the pressure turns into something more visible and the emotional reaction starts to surface. Have you ever noticed how a narcissist reacts when even escalation doesn't get a response? The pressure doesn't land. The silence stays. And that's when something shifts again. Because now it's no longer controlled. It becomes visible. This is where the emotional reaction begins. At this stage, the behavior is harder to hide. The tone becomes more reactive, more exposed. You might see frustration, a sharper message, a more direct tone, or you might see something different, a sudden shift into vulnerability. I don't understand why you're doing this. I thought we were good. This isn't like you. It can go either direction, frustration or emotional appeal, but both are trying to do the same thing. Break the silence. Because now they're not testing, they're reacting. And reaction means something important. They're feeling the loss of control. Because without your response, there's nothing stabilizing the interaction, nothing to work with. And that uncertainty starts to show. They may try something that used to get a reaction, something that used to matter, and for a moment, it can still affect you. But if this is resonating with you, if you've experienced this shift, leave a comment with your story. Because a lot of people go through this moment quietly, not realizing how common it is. And once you see this stage clearly, you realize something important. This isn't random emotion. It's a response to losing control. And when that becomes clear, the dynamic starts to change. In the next chapter, we'll look at the moment they begin to understand what's happening and how the silence starts shifting the power completely, the loss of control. There comes a point where a narcissist realizes your silence isn't temporary, not a pause, not a mood, but a shift. This is where the dynamic changes. Because up until now, everything they've tried, the messages, the pressure, the emotion, was based on one assumption, that eventually you would respond. But now, that assumption starts to break. The silence holds, consistently, without reaction, without explanation. And that's when it becomes clear to them. This isn't a phase. It's a loss of access. And that's what creates this moment. Because without access, there's no control. They can't guide the conversation. They can't influence your emotions. They can't predict your reaction. Because there is no reaction. And for someone who relies on emotional movement, that stillness becomes destabilizing. You might notice the shift. The messages feel different now, less controlled, less calculated, more uncertain, because for the first time, they're not working with a response. They're reacting to the absence of one. And that's what changes the power. Not something you said, not something you proved, but something you removed, your participation. And this is exactly what we break down here on the silent regime. The patterns, the shifts, the exact moments where control either works or starts to fall apart. If this is hitting for you, if you've experienced this shift from confusion to clarity, consider subscribing, because once you understand these dynamics clearly, you stop getting pulled into them. And more importantly, you start recognizing them early. Because once control is lost, there's only one thing left: the realization. In the next chapter, we'll look at the moment it fully clicks for them, when they understand they're no longer in control of the dynamic. There's a moment where it finally clicks for a narcissist. Your silence isn't going to break. Not later. Not eventually. Not if they try one more time. This is the realization. Because up until now, everything they've done, the messages, the pressure, the emotion, was based on the belief that they could still reach you, that the connection was still there, that access wasn't gone, just delayed. But now, that belief starts to disappear. The silence stays consistent. No reaction, no engagement, no shift. And that's when it becomes clear to them, this isn't temporary. It's over. Not in a dramatic way, not with a final conversation, but through absence. Because without your response, there's nothing left to work with. No way to steer it. No way to influence it. No way to pull you back into the dynamic. And that's what makes this moment different. Because this isn't confusion anymore. It's understanding. They see the shift. They feel the loss of control. And they recognize you're no longer participating. And that realization changes everything. Because once someone understands they've lost access, the dynamic can't function the same way. Not because of something you said, but because of something you stopped giving. Your attention, your reactions, your energy. And if you know someone who might still be stuck in a dynamic like this, someone who keeps getting pulled back into the same cycle, consider sharing this video with them, because sometimes all it takes is one moment of clarity for everything to start making sense. Because once this realization happens, there's only one thing left: the end of the dynamic. In the final chapter, we'll look at how it all ends, not with conflict, but with distance. It doesn't end the way most people expect. Not with a final argument, not with closure, not with one last conversation where everything gets resolved. It ends quietly. Because by the time you finally go silent, you're no longer trying to fix anything. You're no longer trying to be understood. You're no longer trying to make the dynamic work. You've already stepped out of it, and that's what actually ends it. Not distance alone, but detachment. Because the connection was never sustained by understanding. It was sustained by your participation, your responses, your energy. And once that's gone, there's nothing left to hold it together. And if you've experienced this moment where something in you just stopped reacting, stopped explaining, stopped engaging, understand what that really was. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't avoidance. It was awareness. The kind that doesn't need to argue, doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need to be seen, because it already sees clearly. And once you see it clearly, you don't go back. Not to the confusion, not to the same conversations, not to the same version of yourself. Because something in you has changed, quietly but permanently. And that's the part people don't talk about. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of understanding. And when that understanding is there, you don't need to fight for control anymore. You already have it. Not over them, but over yourself. And that's what actually ends the dynamic. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely.